Welcome to First Responder Financial Freedom Podcast. We talk to first responders all over the nation who are investing and working on businesses outside of their first responder jobs. Our goal is to motivate and educate each other and help provide a better financial understanding for a better future. Now here are your hosts, Mike Webb, Tyler Thrush, and Aaron Foster.
All right, everybody. This is the First Responder Financial Freedom Podcast. We have Mike Webb, myself, Tyler Thrush, and our host today, Brendon Davis. Brendon is a career fireman working in the upstate New York area. He is also a multifamily investor. And today we're just going to kind of go over how he got started in the fire service, and then what his investing career looks like. So without further ado, Brendon, if you want to give us just a real quick backstory on what made you get into the fire service, how long you've been in, stuff like that, and then we'll just go from there.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for having me on this podcast, guys. I appreciate it. I started in the fire service when I was 22. My father, it's kind of been one of those things that just runs in the family. My father was a fireman. My uncle was a fireman. My uncle's uncle was a fireman. So everybody kind of went in that direction, and they went into a different municipality. I ended up getting hired off a different list and went to another municipality other than that one. But I started off pretty young. I kind of realized, or I thought that I would want to probably go into the fire service when I was in high school. And, it just kind of took, getting the pieces of the puzzle to get to fit with the civil service system and whatnot to get there when I was 22.
So what did you do? Did you ever have any other, I call it profession or job?
Yeah. So at first I went and worked as an EMT for a local ambulance company. I did a bunch of different odd jobs, some construction stuff. I ended up being a dispatcher for for a municipality too, which helped me kind of get my foot in the door for some other stuff and get some experience in the emergency system too.
Yeah, I only asked that because I got hired at 24, and I had some crappy jobs. I look at some of the guys that have never had a real job other than being in the fire service, and I feel like sometimes, and I'm guilty of complaining myself, so don't take this the wrong way, but some people don't realize how good it is sometimes, and I'm like, dude, my first job, I was a landscaper. And when I say landscaper, I use that term loosely. I literally was the lowest guy on the totem pole. I was in high school. And when the tractor trailer of mulch got delivered in the giant parking lot, I was the guy that had to kill the snakes. And you get the mulch down in your shoes because you definitely aren't wearing work boots. Why would you? You're in high school. And it's just miserable. It's hot. I don't like really mine steaks, but I don't like them either. And now I'm in this mulch. It's in my socks. It's hot. It's miserable. I'm making $5 an hour. But then all those experiences and crappy jobs make you appreciate when you have when I call a good job. So I was just curious. 100%. That's all.
No, it's true. Yeah. Dude. A lot of the guys complaining are the ones that have either been in too long or only had fire service jobs. And you're like, man, if you want to pay me this much to clean a toilet, I will go clean that toilet better than anybody else.
It's going to be the cleanest toilet.
Yeah, it's really, that's the hardest part of our day sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. You want to suck, be a roofer in July, or in California, probably just about any time. So
yeah, there's definitely something to be said for that.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So hired at 24, and I know you said it's civil service. I know some departments or areas do it real different. Where I'm at, you have to take a test for that particular department. So it's not uncommon to take 3, 4, 5, 10 tests before you get hired. So you said you got hired at 24. How long did it take you to get hired? Was
actually, no, that's a good
test
point.
And done?
No, unfortunately, I was ready to get hired at 18 in the municipality that that all my family worked in. And there was, as luck would have it, a hiring freeze. So there was no hiring for that time period. The list ran out. I took some other tests, and as luck would have it, I ended up getting on at that department at 22. And so it all kind of came full circle. And my brother, who's one of my business partners, he took a little bit of a different path. He got a little frustrated with the civil service system. ended up kind of doing some other odd jobs, didn't go to paramedic school, so he couldn't get hired in the municipality I did, but he ended up getting hired in the municipality that my family works in. And so it all kind of came full circle. But yeah, no, some of the hardest parts is waiting to get into your foot into the door. When you're waiting for that, and people try to figure out income until then. And so it's a very competitive arena for sure.
Yeah, I feel like less competitive. When I was getting hired, I think there was 25 or 28 spots in my class and there was 1,100 applicants. So like, that's pretty competitive, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
But now being on like the other side of the curtain, it's like, hey, we're getting ready to hire 3 classes. We have this many applicants, and it drops off really fast. Like there for a while, it was like hard to get more than 500 or 600 people for a test, which is absurd to me. But anyways.
Yeah, it depends on the qualifications too, because we've kind of went back and forth on that with, what the qualifications should be for people and candidates, and, residency requirements and stuff like that. So that can be a little bit of a hurdle for hiring.
Sure. So when did you get on the job? What year?
2010.
Okay. And when did you get into real estate?
So my real estate journey kind of started actually when I was still in high school. I bought my first 4-unit when I was 20, but before that, I was basically we have a family friend who we used to go on vacation with. He worked for the state and did some other stuff part-time, and we were going on trips and doing all sorts of stuff. And I'm just like, man, how is this guy doing it? And after a little bit of talking with him, hanging out on the trips and stuff, come to find out he owned real estate. So I took a little bit, that kind of struck with me while I was in high school. And I thought about it a little bit more, and I kind of always knew I would end up in the fire service, or hope that I would. And, obviously with the schedules that we have, sometimes that allows you to do some other stuff, just like everybody does. So I kind of thought, well, maybe I should do the real estate. And what ended up happening is I kind of, how can I, and he gave me some books, and I don't know how seriously he took me. Gave me some books. So I read the books. I come back, I sit down with him, and, I utilize one of the strategies in the books. And one of the strategies was, drive around a neighborhood that you really want to invest in, send some letters out and see if you can pick up some places that way. Well, about a year later, I was sitting dispatching, and a gentleman called me and said, "Hey, I got your letter here. You want to buy my 4-unit?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I bought my first 4-unit when I was 20, and I've utilized a mentor and my coach kind of to kind of help me through that path and kind of get my foot in the door in real estate. So that's kind of how I started.
So was that mentor that you're talking about, was that family friend, or is this somebody different?
Yeah, no, it's that family
Nice.
friend. Yeah. And we still stay in touch, to this day. So.
Very cool. And then I noticed a lot of your stuff that you currently hold, and then that one I'm assuming too. So you basically jumped right into multifamily, or at least to multi-units, correct?
Yeah. So the 4-unit kind of, I like the idea of being able to live in 1 unit and still have 3 income producing units. The path of least resistance for your first property is the FHA loan. So I utilized that. I lived in 1 unit, and then kind of went from there.
So
Perfect.
Hold up. We got a lot to go back and rewind there. So, so you said they gave you a book. What book was that?
Oh, well, he gave me a couple books. There was a couple Donald Trump books. I think one was The Art of the Deal. Rich Dad Poor Dad. That's like a classic. Like you can't listen to a real estate podcast without someone bringing up Rich Dad Poor Dad. I think one of them, ironically enough, was Shut Up, Stop Whining, and Get a Life. I don't know if you ever heard of that book. A little bit more motivation.
No, but it sounds like something I would say.
A little bit more motivation angled, but I think it helped, and goal setting, that kind of stuff. So that was another book that I got from him.
Okay, so first off, that's awesome that we were just talking about this. Like, I wish my 20-year-old self could talk to my 40-year-old self, but then again, the advice I would have got from my 40-year-old self to my 20-year-old self most of it I probably wasn't ready to hear. So that's how I justify some of it.
Yeah.
So kudos to you for being 20 and taking down your first deal, because I literally had this conversation with somebody that's almost 40 and has not ever owned their own home. And I was just like, basically trying to walk them through like why I think it's a good idea. So, so you mentioned in essence, it's what sounds like driving for dollars. Can you just kind of break that down? Like what you did, you just drove around aimlessly and wrote down addresses?
Yeah, so that's really what I did, and I did it the old school way. There's so many different ways to do it now, and it's so nice to have the resources at your fingertips. But at the time, the strategy was go around, write all the addresses down, bring all the address down to the tax assessor. It's public information. You can find out who owns the property and send them a letter. So, and then for a long time, I just drove around with letters in my car with me, and I would just, you're like, oh, that. Like 4 mailboxes. All right, that looks like it's pretty good. And then you just, drop one in there. Now, unfortunately, you don't always get the owner on a 4-unit like that, but using the tax assessor's office in association with that can kind of help you get in touch with the right people.
And that's the funny part too, because a lot of people want I would say one of the biggest hurdles for people is they don't have money to get started. And I think what you just described is something that's it's not easy to do, but once you actually decide you're going to do it, the rest of the process is fairly easy. It's okay, I'm going to drive around. Okay, I'm going to write the addresses down. Now I'm going to go to the assessor's office and look up this information. Now I know where the owner lives. And you just do the next indicated step. And before you know it, you have a list, or at least you can mail individual letters and keep track of that list and continue to mail them. I think with all the technology right now, I think a lot of us try to complicate it. Like, ooh, I need this wazoo, whiz bang strategy with 8 different websites and a skip tracing and all of these things. When I think what you did, it's funny because not a lot of people will do it, and you're eliminating a lot of your competition right off the bat with some of those things. And I still use the assessor's office and the recorder's office because when it comes down to it, they have the absolute most accurate data. So I like the fact that you did that. I think it's good. And like anything, it gives you like a baseline knowledge, right? It's like the job that we all have. You get in, you're out of the academy, you have a baseline knowledge, and then you're going to increase it as you go along. And to me, that's like, if you understand how that whole process works that you just laid out, I think that's huge, and not a lot of people do. So when you skip that, they're really reliant upon other people to do things for them, or other companies that they have to pay. When in reality, I mean, I would assume that you're glad that you did it that way, as you can repeat that anytime, anywhere. I could put you in any city in the US. You could go drive around. You could write the addresses down. The assessor's office is where you're going to get the information, and then you can put something in the mail.
Yeah, absolutely. Policies and procedures, even like fast forwarding to our bigger business, our group that we're investing through now. Policies and procedures are huge. And that was the group that, not to fast forward too much, but the group that we started, that was one of the very first things we did. And we didn't buy a property. We looked for a long time. We didn't find a property that fit our criteria. And we used that time to build our business plan, to set up our policies and procedures, because we had developed a lot of experience over that it's been about 15 years now since we got started investing.
So before we get to that part, you mentioned the FHA loan. So you lived in that 4-unit?
Yeah.
So for those not familiar, could you explain why the FHA loan is a benefit? And I'm sure Tyler could touch on that also. And going with a multifamily property using an FHA loan, kind of like what the benefits were and what that looked like for you financially. Because I would imagine you were living for either next to nothing or actually making a profit by living there.
Yeah, pretty close. There were some long-term tenants that had lived there, and I only lived there short term. I think it was only a year that it was required, I believe. But
is that what's required, Tyler? A year?
Yeah, it's 1 year. So you have an occupancy agreement of 1 year, which is huge. And I'm glad you brought that up. As long as you live there for a year, you're good to go.
Yeah, because you'll hear people maybe advocate for bending the rules, and we don't subscribe to that here.
Right.
That's fraud. So if you live in one of the 4 units for 1 year, you can use that FHA loan. And is that good up until a 5-unit, Tyler?
Yeah, you can go 1 to 4, and then after that, you would go into commercial property. So,
Okay, so a 4-unit is the most you can use with the FHA.
correct. Yeah. And I think it's
Okay.
like the single most powerful thing. Like, so when I think of young guys and girls on the job, if I could give one piece of advice, it would be to do what you already did. And when they're starting, it's like, hey, most of the time you're single, you're not married, you don't have a lot of obligations. If you could just buy one fourplex
Dude.
with 3.5% down,
That's the other benefit is the down
dude,
payment is 3%
you're
down.
you're just like, it is such a huge head start. So
And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was creatively financing because I don't think I had any money. And I just asked a couple relatives and they liked the thought of it. They said, we appreciate where you're coming from. And I said,
like,
hey,
well,
can
Brendon
I
doesn't appear to be a dumbass. Yeah, we'll give him a couple bucks.
But it's so crazy looking back at it now, about how inexperienced, like walking in the door when you feel like, 20 years old, I can't even go to a bar and get a beer yet. Now I have this big brick building that I own. So it was a little bit of a reality check at the time. And, looking back at it now, how like crazy, naive that it's like, you think you have it all figured out, and like tenants, leasing, bad tenants, like, it's just like, I've learned so much in the last 15 years. It's insane, really.
Earning or learning, man. And it's
true.
even great when you can kind of do a little bit of both, because even though you weren't necessarily maybe collecting a paycheck, those guys are paying down the loan. You're getting a little monthly cash flow. You're getting the depreciation, and now you
Right.
still hold the place, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Have
Absolutely.
you
Yeah,
refied out or just paid it off at this point?
I've refied it a couple times because of our strategy. We're not super capital heavy. So what we end up doing is we end up kind of refining, putting it into the next deal. And that's kind of how our process has been. But and the next step was someone I ran into a friend of mine at a bar. I think it was like a month later, and I said, he's like, hey, how you doing? What's going on? I said, I just bought a 4-unit. He goes, you want 4 more? I go, yeah, sure.
I like your friends.
Yeah, right. That's what I thought too. But this one was the real learning experience because it wasn't as a nice neighborhood. And he really wanted out of the deal really badly. So what ended up happening is I sat back down with my mentor. He said, here, why don't we do this? Let's come up with a land contract. You'll buy the property, you'll pay his bills off or pay his monthly bills. And in there, we also put a year agreement that if I wanted to give the building back at any point during the year, I could do that. Now that one, I know everybody has their own take on, effort and, making something a success. But I think, Mike, to kind of your point, what you don't know at the time, maybe you won't listen to, or, that kind of thought process. So that building, I did end up giving back to him because it was a complete nightmare. It was bad from the get-go. There was bad tenants. I think there was one main tenant that was kind of scaring some other tenants out. It was not a great neighborhood. Basically, the straw that broke the camel's back was somebody thought I shut their water off. It was a duplex that had the units all split up, and there was a water pipe that went outside. They thought that I shut their water off, but in actuality, it froze because they weren't paying their rent. They thought I shut it off. And they went down and turned every spigot in the basement and the steam radiators. It was water everywhere. It was bad. So learning and earning, right? Like you said.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be nice if you could just take a baseball? Never mind. But like, people are crazy. That, I always joke that the song, beer is good and people are crazy because it's so friggin' true. But hey, I wasn't paying my rent. A pipe froze because, I'm imagining it gets cold in New York. Right. And clearly it's your fault. So here, right. So what's the logical thing to do? Flood the place.
I'll go down and turn everything on. And you know what? I was validated with the whole thing and full circle. At least I feel like I was, because I gained a lot of experience through owning that building. I realized that there was another avenue for creatively, getting into some deals when people are motivated. And then the last piece to the puzzle was, I watched it after I gave it back to the gentleman, and I bought it for like $130,000 off of I was paying the rest of his mortgage. It's still not occupied. 10, 12 years later, I think it was down on the market for like 50 grand, and nobody would pick it up. Nobody would even touch it. So I feel okay that maybe it wasn't my biggest success, but sometimes you got to know when to get out also.
But you learned.
Yeah, absolutely.
And sometimes those lower price properties too, and I'm not sure if that's lower for the area you're in, they're so enticing. And a lot of newer investors are like, oh man, I can buy this property for 20 grand. And you really have to think, excuse me, you really have to think, well, why is it this cheap? And what is this in
Right.
relation to the other areas?
And no
One of my
money
good
down, and the motivation for him was really a big key. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're fine. Yeah, and that's huge. There's a lot of things. So like, and that's what made me think of it. So one of my old squad partners, they bought some stuff in Tennessee, and one of the guys already owned it. They formed this partnership. They didn't have to put a lot of money in. They were just going to rehab the property and then fix it up and then get it rented out. But appliances got stolen. All of these things happened. It was like 1, 2, 3. And the enticing part was they knew who the seller was. They were going to be partnering with them, and there wasn't a lot of capital outlay at first. But I believe, I spoke to him last week, I believe they ended up selling it too. And I was like, to your point, my thought was, man, just rip the Band-Aid off right now. That sometimes a bad property is a bad property is a bad property. No matter what you do, it's just not going to pencil out. And I said, just rip it off now, move along, and just, hey, it's a mistake, right? Or not a mistake. It's a good learning experience. And you'll know now certain things that, I've done a ton of those. I bought this place in Northern Idaho, 40 grand in Weiser. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be a home run. I'm going to crush it on this thing. And then I ended up selling it for $45,000 like 2 years later, after I had spent a lot of money doing things. And I'm like, all right, well, chalk that up to experience. And hey, it is what it is. I look at it this way. I paid a few $1,000s for experience, but I did get another deal under my belt. I understand how to deal with adversity in certain areas where I had not before. And so now I'm sure if you get a situation that feels the same, you're going to make money off of something that previously cost you money.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I like that. And I like the rip the Band-Aid off phrase, because we used it. I would have liked to have used that same thing in another property that we had bought, and not rip the Band-Aid off so much in selling the property, but just it was loaded with bad tenants. We needed a lot of construction. And what I did was I ended up taking a long time to renovate that over like 5 years, and dealt with some of the bad tenants. And it was like, looking back now, I wish I had just ripped the Band-Aid off, kicked everybody out, or maybe done 1 4-unit and then another 4-unit, because it was an 8-unit complex, and just, like you said, rip the Band-Aid off. So sometimes that aggressive strategy, I do feel like, works if you're not, if there's high upside and you can kind of mitigate your own risk.
So you mentioned, Brendon, you bought that one, or the one you gave back, I believe you used something called a land contract. Could you kind of just give a overview of what that is? Because I don't think I know a lot of folks are not familiar with that instrument and how that actually works for a buyer and a seller.
Sure. So I'm not a lawyer. My wife is a lawyer, but she doesn't do real estate law. But
we are definitely not lawyers. We are definitely barely qualified to do anything.
No, yeah, but so essentially the land contract just says that it's a contract between a buyer and a seller. Nothing really changes hands as far as the mortgage. The deed doesn't change hands, so everything kind of stays in the seller's hands. So there has to be a little bit. There's definitely some risk. You got to make sure that the seller's paying their mortgage payment still, and not taking your check and doing something else with it. That's the first thing. The second thing, it can be a little bit of a slippery slope with selling the building as far as the mortgage goes. So a lot of times there's a due on sale clause and stuff like that, but it's a pretty common thing that people do this. I wouldn't say common, but it happens frequently. So essentially the bills get put in your name other than the mortgage, and then you're just paying the seller the mortgage payment that they need to, and maybe it's above and beyond. Maybe you come up with an agreement that you're going to pay a little bit more than their current mortgage payment, and that's their interest or whatever. So
yeah, so sometimes referred to as like a contract for deed or land contract, and every state's a little bit different. I'm actually working on one right now through a trust, but basically, for those that maybe didn't catch all of that, if I own a property and say my mortgage payment is $1,000, I could sit there and add the taxes. I could add up the insurance. So let's just say that's $1,200. I could then go sell it to Brendon for an agreed upon price. So let's just say I owe $100,000. I might sell it to him for $150, and then I can roll that mortgage payment of $1,000 plus the taxes and insurance that are escrowed into that. So he would pay me $1,200 a month. I would pay my mortgage payment. And then whenever he paid his last payment, the deed would transfer legally to him. So it's a creative structure. It's a way that basically you can buy a property with maybe a little out of pocket, or maybe somebody that's ready to just retire, whatever the case may be. Again, and it's largely state specific. There's certain language and contracts that are used in different parts of the country. So I would encourage you, if that's something that's interesting, like just dive into your state specific laws, because it's not easy to paint with a broad brush on a lot of that stuff. But that stuff like blew my mind. I didn't even know that was an option when I got into real estate. Everybody thinks you have to go on Zillow, buy the house with an agent. Like, a lot of people's mind are blown whenever
Put
you realize,
20% down and the whole
yeah,
thing.
exactly.
Yeah.
I'm like, God, no, like I haven't put 20% down. I can't tell you how long. So
That's the interesting part about it. Is all of this is like you can do so many creative things. You're limited by your own creativity. So I mean, a lot of people think that hurdle is 20% down or whatever the case may be. So that's cool that you guys did that. And I mean, you now have that tool in your tool belt.
Yeah,
So if
absolutely.
you see it down the road, it's like, okay, we know what we can do with this. And Mike, same thing. It's like as you continue down the road, it's like you're always learning just different strategies, different tactics. I pick stuff up all the time. And I just like listening to you guys right now. I'm like, oh, this is interesting, because I don't think California, I don't think we have anything like that. I mean, it's just I'm almost positive we don't. But it's interesting to me. It's like you could do a rap, right? You can do a rap on an existing note, and it's a similar concept yet different. So that's super interesting.
here's this
It's a
one's
good
kind of
general.
interesting that I'm working on. And just in full disclosure, you guys were talking about dogs. Like, I'm dealing with a dog property right now. So like it still catches up with you even once you've been doing it for a couple minutes. So, but this one kind of is neat, and it came to fruition while I was out of town, which is really cool because it kind of speaks to some of the systems. And you said policy and procedures. Like, obviously, I think most of us in this type of work and police and whatnot are very SOP or SOG driven. So it's like, if you like, we use Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, and Delta for our designation of a building. I use that same designation with my facility managers at the storage. And when I was flipping, like, my contractor knew if I said the Bravo side of the building, he knew what I was talking about. So I basically overlaid a lot of that stuff into this world. But we have our systems set up, and they definitely still need tweaking. But I was out of town, a lead comes in, get the information, go look at it. I didn't. I was obviously out of town. We basically get this property for $42,500, which is a cheap single family house where this is at. I was like, I know who will buy this. Text him, said, I'll sell it to you for 70. He said, I can do 60. I said, well, I can do 70. He bought it. So he's buying it for 70, and we're going to hold the financing. So we're financing 70,000, but my basis is only 42,500. So it's
smart.
like, yeah. So it's like, hey, take that deal and supersize it, man. Like,
Yeah.
and now I basically get to hold the note at 70, but again, my basis is 42,500. So it's like, I feel like I'm pretty protected, and he's going to finance the rehab. So
yeah, that was seriously, that was smart.
But you might as well have just explained to me the U.S. tax code in Mandarin whenever I first got started, because I would have had no idea what you're talking about. So, like, to Tyler's point, like, you're just learning as you go, and you get these other tools in your tool belt. And whenever I saw that, I was like, oh, I can put these pieces, not just me, my business partner, Bill, also, like, we put these pieces together to basically do that, which, as before, like, we never would have been able to even comprehend that. So.
Yeah, and you're going to see what you're drawn to, right? Like you're going to find certain aspects of real estate you love, certain aspects that you hate. And it's like, okay, the stuff that you love, lean into it and apply it anywhere. So I mean, anything creative, man, like, it's funny. So I don't do a lot of creative just because I've always just done the cash buys. But creative to me is just so impressive because it literally opens your bucket. I mean, you're casting a much wider net. And it's interesting to me as far as that goes. And it's weird because, like I said, California, until recently, I haven't really heard it, and now it's definitely becoming a buzzword with the interest rates going back up. And I know in the 70s and 80s it was huge too, so I'm sure it'll become much more commonplace. So if people that are listening, if they can educate themselves on any type of creative finance, whether it's owner financing, anything of the sort, I think it would be a huge benefit in the next couple of years.
Dude, it's like I call it a time machine. So like we've had Travis Oglesby on, and I took his course, and full disclosure, I'm friends with Travis. Like, so I learned what he was doing, and we've bought several properties, but like we just bought a property recently where we took it over subject to, and the interest rate's 3.75. So it's like, when was the last time you could get 3.75? Like today, you cannot do that, but we got it. So it's like going back in time and getting this deal under contract, like as if the rates were still that low.
That's
again,
crazy.
didn't even know how to do that. So, the more you learn, I guess the more you earn too. So
yeah, part of being creative too sometimes is like what we've always found is like you got to be a problem solver, and a lot of times some solutions can come up through the problem solving that can kind of benefit both parties, and creative financing is a big one. So a lot of times,
Sure.
if you find, because a lot of times now with the bigger properties that we're looking at, they're, you got to go off market, you're going direct to seller a lot of times, and not everybody's looking to sell right away. So we've always taken to the idea of like, if you have a problem, we'll figure out how to solve it. And sometimes those creative, either financing or just creative solutions in general, kind of come out and through that talk.
So Brendon, you said you have a partnership now. What does that look like? Are you guys still swinging the hammers and property management? And then what's the portfolio look like right now?
So my brother and I, after we moved out of those properties, my brother and I kind of partnered, and I realized he's very mechanically inclined. We have a really good partnership. We can walk through a building, and obviously through the fire department, I have a pretty good grasp of construction as well. But I utilize him, or we utilize each other for each other's skills. And my skill set is more towards the deal finding, the marketing, the leasing, stuff like that. His is more geared towards the construction end. So we really kind of found a good partnership with that. We did a couple burrs. We did another house hack. We lived in a house that we bought from our family. We fixed it up, refinanced that, and then bought another property, did the same thing, and didn't actually live in that one, but we refinanced that one, and we kind of moved forward. So as far as the partnership goes, my brother and I, we ended up selling the 2 single families, and in hopes of kind of leveraging up and moving into some larger complexes. And so my brother and I have our business, and then we while this whole thing was transpiring over the
Houston, we have a problem. Are you there?
Am I here?
Yeah, you're good now. Yeah,
you just bited out on me, bro.
I went out.
Great,
sorry about
we're
that.
censored.
Yeah,
that was it.
All right, you're
between the art of the deal and that, we're in trouble.
Yeah. Yep,
Oh,
exactly.
sorry, I'm
Might
not
as well
supposed
throw
to mention
COVID in the
that
mix
stuff.
while we're here.
No, we're kidding.
Just kidding.
We do all the time.
Aaron's not here, so we have to find a reason to make this politically incorrect.
Oh,
Yes.
I gotcha.
No, I'm just kidding.
So,
right, go for it.
yeah, so no, my other business partner, he was kind of building up his own portfolio. He helped us with ours. He's a financial advisor. So now at this point in the larger business that we have, which we're is the business we're really working on and looking to scale every day. We have, my brother who's in the maintenance end of things, myself who's in the leasing, deal finding, marketing, and then my partner who's in the finance. So speaking about policies and procedures and how everything goes, I read the book Traction by Gino Wickman. I really like that book, and I tried to take as much from that book and apply it to our business. We have a vision traction organizer for us, and our goals are all set up. So and having lanes for everybody has been really helpful for us. So that way nobody's overlapping. Everybody's on the same page as what everybody's responsibilities are.
Nice. So, and on that, I'm looking on your guys' website right now too. So, this property on Paisley Road, that's a 17-unit complex, correct?
Yep. We just bought that a year ago.
So, like, I love looking at stuff because it raises all kinds of questions for me. So, like, I see 10 acres. I'm like, oh, maybe they're going to develop more. Maybe they can't. That's interesting. The on-site coin-operated laundry. That's interesting to me too. So I'm going to ask you some questions.
Sure.
Was that already existing as far as the laundry goes? Was that an additional revenue stream? I know that you mentioned you like to do value add. Was that even a consideration, or was that just, hey, this is already in effect, let's do this? And then with that 10 acres, are there any plans to develop, or are you guys just going to leave it the way it is?
So that's a great question. So part of the value add strategy for this, there's a couple pieces of the puzzle. One, this was a deal that we actually found on the MLS. It was the buyer kind of got burned by a buyer from out of town, got frustrated, and then we were kind of a backup offer, and he went with us, which was really hard to find, especially at the time a year ago. Still now, even finding deals on the MLS that you're not getting outbid in is difficult. So the rents were really low. We knew that the rents could go up a lot more, and that's basically a lot of where our strategy is now. Taking units, fixing them up a little bit, making them a nicer, complex for the tenants, and then being able to, get that up more towards market rent. So that's one aspect of the value add that we use. The coin op was already there. That's a nice feature for some tenants, especially in a rural area where that is. So that way they're not having to go far if there's no in-unit laundry. And then as far as the development, my brother and I, we have a separate project on the first 8 unit that we bought that has some land that is buildable that we're working on right now. But we looked through it. Unfortunately, some of it's wetlands. We knew a lot of it through our due diligence when we were going into this. We knew that there was a possibility of maybe being able to build, and maybe even if it's not apartments, we've thought about storage units or even just garage units. Just even garages for the tenants is just an amenity that people will pay a little bit extra for, that you can kind of make that part of your cash flow. So we've looked into a lot of those aspects for the larger property up there.
Do you ever have problems with your laundry? Because I swear to the Lord, every time I have a couple coin operated washers and dryers, and it's like, you really thought it was a good idea to use this like a rock tumbler, bro? Like, that's a pair of work boots that are caked in mud. No wonder it's broke,
Yeah, and luckily our maintenance, we have a maintenance supervisor who we obtained through the building, and he lives in the building. He's been there for like 20 years. He's probably the biggest asset that we have there. He knows the ins and outs of that place like nobody's business. Nice. And he takes care of everything. So if there's somebody submits a work order, we have an online rent management system. If somebody submits a work order, Rob is over there basically instantly.
That's awesome. Quick story about the washers and dryers. So I used to own this 6-unit building. I had a washer and dryer, coin operated. And when my oldest son was a little bit younger, he had this big piggy bank thing. And I'd take him over there with a freezer bag. I'd say, all right, let's go get some piggy food. And so that was kind of like one of the things we would do is go over and get the piggy food. And went over one time and somebody had broke into it and stole all the money. And he was just devastated. And I was like, well, let this be a powerful lesson, buddy.
Lesson number 1. Wow.
Yeah.
That's tough.
Heartbreak. Yeah. So kids crying, walking out with an empty piggy food bag. But it's washers and dryers drive me crazy. I don't know what it is, but so like 17 units, is that what you said? That's where you're at?
Yep. 17 units.
And you self-manage based on the sounds of it, right?
Yeah, we went to an online management software, RentTech Direct, which has really helped us do like all online payments, maintenance work orders through the system, and it's really helped streamline things. So I use my 12 units with my brother through that, and we also use it for the 17-unit complex, and we're going to use that moving forward because
so you got 12 units and 17 units, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. And you've alluded to a bigger company and kind of what you're moving to and maybe raising money. What is your aspirations to build this thing out?
Yeah, so through that, the DAB3 group, that's what we're called, that owns the 17 unit. We're looking to just kind of scale up through these value add properties, utilize some of our money, maybe utilize some friends and family or some money that people are trying to put to work, and keep scaling the business and find some of these larger complexes. We're trying to stay in the 12 to anywhere between 40 or 50 unit range, and looking at some larger stuff.
Yeah, well, and that's kind of I was having this conversation the other day with somebody about basically our avatar with storage. And if you go with that 12 to 50 unit, most of those deals are going to be a little too big to the landlord that's doing all the repairs himself and does everything by paper and pen. And not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying, like, most of those folks are not going to want to mess with 12 to 50 units. But that group is also too small, or that size deal is too small for a lot of the big companies like the REITs and the bigger players typically. So you're kind of in like that sweet spot of like, it's too big for most little investors in the neighborhood and it's too small for the big boys. Right. So it kind of allows you to take advantage of that kind of like little band of properties. And depending on where you're at, like, I don't know New York really, but I know the Northeast, so to speak, or most of the older communities in the United States probably have a lot of that, like 2 units, 4 units, 8 units, 10 units. At least around here, you see a fair amount of it.
Yeah, no, there's
And,
definitely a lot.
and you have to go to like we'll call it like since the 1980s or 1970s to 80s built stuff to find the 50 unit and 100 unit complexes. So
yeah,
that's
absolutely.
a good sweet spot, man. I think it's cool. So as far as raising money, so at this point, you guys have pretty much self-funded, been creative, that kind of stuff, correct?
Yeah, so I'm really looking to kind of expand our horizons on that. With that, the challenge that I'm finding right now is the deal flow, because it is a good niche to be in there, but I do find in our area it's very competitive in that area still. So, but we're also looking at the fact that some of these deals, when you're really putting it all out there and trying to get that deal for your company, it's hard utilizing investors' funds as well as in place of your funds, because obviously you need to kind of make sure that the payouts are correct, and obviously they have a vested interest in the property too. So finding that ideal property for us has been a little bit tricky, but we're really got a lot of, my partner calls it dripping water. We have a lot of people we're dripping water on, and as far as that goes, and and that's kind of what it takes to get those private deals and those stuff that doesn't hit the MLS and whatnot.
I think for you, I mean, for me, I found with all my raising the private money, it's like the more you talk about what you do, it's funny how stuff just keeps coming and coming. Like Mike was saying, he was on vacation and some money came his way too. It's interesting how I think as far as raising money go, everybody wants to complicate it sometimes and think, oh, this is going to be really difficult. But if you speak, like I can tell that you enjoy doing this, right?
Oh, yeah.
Most people will listen to us talk. And I didn't really realize this until I asked people why they were giving me money. They're like, well, A, it seems like you know what you're doing, and B, it seems like you really like doing it. So they feel comfortable giving you their money. And once you unlock that private capital portion, I think, possibilities are endless. And for me too, a lot of it, like we think of, single family, you're going to raise private money. But I'm pretty sure, Mike, you and Bill raised private money even for the storage facilities, right? And it allows you guys to get into deals where a lot of people, they get so focused on bank financing. And the reason I'm saying this is I don't know what the price of the buildings are that you're looking at, but I would think you could probably find, maybe 1 or 2 investors that would do it. And for me, it was always like, oh, I'm just doing this for single family. But when Mike and Bill raised it for storage, I was like, well, I borrow $500,000 all the time for houses that are in Idaho, or $300,000 to $500,000 that are for houses. Why wouldn't I do that for storage? Because now I take one asset that only would have one paying tenant if things went bad, and now I have 50 different tenants that I can do. So I'm mitigating my risk. Whereas, hey, maybe I would owe them $3,000 a month if something happened, but if I had a storage facility or an apartment complex, maybe it's $300 a month. So I think you're on the right track. I like your guys' website. I can tell that you're doing it. I personally am enjoying raising private money and doing private lending more and more these days. And it goes to the point of all of us know our avatar, right? When you start, you'll pretty much take anything that is real estate. It's kind of like, well, right.
When you're first starting, sure. You have to say yes, like, yes. And then eventually you have to say no, no, no.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden you're like, I buy real estate. And then now it's like, I buy 1 to 4 units in this zip code built after 1980 that does not have this, this, and this, but also has this, specifically. It's like, hey, when you first get on the job, dude, I'll take a dumpster fire, a Christmas tree fire. Now, as you get further along, I'm like, can we get a commercial where I can go cut on the roof, please?
Yeah, I found that you definitely have to be, there's been lots of deals that have come through the last, since we really wanted to get a deal that last calendar year, and it didn't come to fruition. But we talked as a group after, and I think that really spoke more to our discipline rather than, because we could have overpaid for a deal for sure and put ourselves in a little bit more of a bad spot and kind of gone away from our policies and procedures and principles. But instead we decided to kind of stay disciplined, wait for the right deal to come across. And we're still kind of holding true to that.
And I have to go on this little tangent, even though Aaron's not here, I'll do it for him. The best part that you said to me, and I was listening to you, said that it's still competitive on the MLS, right? And it's still hard to find deals. My biggest thing for people listening is, if you listen to the news right now, it's like, oh, the market's terrible, all of these things. Yet Blackstone, Chase, all these multi-billion-dollar companies are all raising and deploying funds into real estate. So
Yeah.
it's so funny how I think it's a distraction for us, but man, there's a lot of money to be made right now. So
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all about finding the right deals and making sure that you're getting into the right deals for the right reasons, for sure.
Yeah, don't watch the news. There's wag the dog or whatever it's called.
yeah, well, for sure. So like, as far as raising money, since Mike and I have raised a decent amount of money, each one of us, do you have any questions, like, as far as
Yeah,
any of
absolutely.
that goes?
Yeah, no, actually, I'm glad that you asked. So I'm finding it. Do you find that more people that want to invest money, do they want like a flat interest rate, or do they want like equity in the deal? Do you see a different cross section of people who want different things?
Mike, you can go first, then I'll go.
So I go with the keep it simple, stupid approach. You start talking about equity and stuff that's maybe like crazy to some folks that aren't involved in real estate. I go back to the confused mind always says no.
Yeah.
So I try and make it very simple. So what I've done is, and frankly, I've raised a fair amount of money from folks that are in the first responder community. So not that these folks don't get it, but they're not dealing with real estate investments for the most part on a day-to-day basis. So what I did is I said, here's what it looks like if you invest 50,000. Here's what it looks like if you invest 100,000. Here's what you would get paid every month. Here's, kind of the life of the deal and what it looks like for you. And then that way they can clearly see in black and white, like, if I put in X, I get Y, and it would be for about this long. So over that course of time, I would earn about this much. And whenever the deal's done, I would get all of my initial capital back. Because like, to me, I tell folks, like, the best return you're going to get, like, is I'm going to guarantee the return of your capital. I don't care if you make it, I do, but like, I would rather return every single dollar you gave me, even if you made $0, like, you didn't lose. So like, I think folks that are going to invest with you obviously want to like you, know you, and trust you. And I've just kept it relatively simple. I don't pressure people. I just say, hey, like I posted today, I have an opportunity to put money into a deal. If you want to earn a return, you're secured in first position. And I basically just explain, like, you're secured by a real asset in first lien position. And what that means is, if somebody doesn't pay, we're going to get the property back, and then you're going to basically be made whole. So, right. And what I would do in that scenario is I would be the one handling all the BS that came from that. My lender would never even feel it. They would just get their money back, and I would basically be the one to have to work through all of that. So I have done some deals where folks have got equity. I'm actually going back and forth with somebody right now who's brought me a storage deal, and they want equity instead of a payment. And I was like, well, that starts to get a little more complicated, because then it's like, when do you get paid? And like, frankly, it's not what I really want to do.
Yeah,
right?
no, and I
agree.
Like,
look at Shark Tank. All these people want equity, right? And so do I. Like, if I'm just being frank, like, I would rather have the equity also. But I think if you're going to raise funds with just people in your like direct ecosystem, keeping it simple, not to insult their intelligence, obviously, but just explaining on a very elementary scale, like, what it looks like. And then I think what we've seen is, once it comes full cycle, like, we had somebody invest 40 grand, and then once they saw it, they're like, can you use 100? Bro, yeah, absolutely. Yes, we can. So, And
That's the biggest
you'll
thing.
see it just starts to snowball a little bit, right? So
Yeah, and I'm not a big fan of equity either. I think it muddies the waters, and I think
I mean, I like equity. I just want to be the one with the equity.
For
right?
sure, right? And the thing is like, so I was going to tell Brendan, like, it's funny that you mentioned something before too, and like I in the same way where you forget that you are definitely the expert when it comes to doing what you're doing, and they're coming to you because that's how they view you. And so I think at this point, I would definitely, if I was in your position, I would only be looking for piece lenders, not as an equity partner. Now that's just me personally, because I think when you get partnerships, weird things happen. And like Mike said, I just use this most simple terms. I'm going to pay you this amount of interest. The loan is going to last this period of time. And then after that, you will get all your capital back plus interest. The way I do everything is I don't make any payments during the term of the loan. At the sale of the property, they get their principal back plus their interest. And then, like Mike said, it usually fosters a new conversation, which is, hey, I really liked making that much money on my money. Can you use this money or more? And people begin to trust you. Like they said, they're not investing in that property, they're investing in you, and they're investing because they trust you. So I'm not saying you would, but basically for everybody listening, as long as you never abuse that trust, you will have an endless supply of money. And it's fun for them because a lot of people want to do what you are doing, but they don't know how to do it. And they probably won't ever do it because it's too much. Whereas, hey, I got 50, or I think like Mike just used 45. I've got $45,000 laying around. Can you use it? And then they get to go say, I'm investing in real estate. I'm a private lender. All these things that we like to say too. So if I was in your shoes, I would do and I would always treat it as a lender situation. Very rarely, I think, would I ever do in equities. I did one last year and it worked out well. But for me, I gave away so much profit, it killed me. But it was something where I personally wasn't super comfortable in. And I knew the horizon was going to be really long. So I thought, well, okay, I can tie up all of my money. And my thought was, hey, if I do all of that and it does take a long time, I'm going to put myself at risk. Whereas if I split the risk with an equity partner, I now have doubled my capital availability. They also will be responsible. They're also a sophisticated investor. So it worked. But that's like literally the one time that I can think of. And I knew going in, yeah, I'm going to give up more profit than I'm comfortable with. But at this same time, to complete this specific deal, I needed to do it. So if you do look at equity positions, I would say only on a deal by deal basis. And I don't think you were ever going to be like, oh, we'll give you 10% of our company, but yeah, always on a deal by deal basis. And once you get this down, it's like off to the races.
Yeah.
Because you already know how to do the other part. You already know how to buy the buildings, find the buildings, stabilize them. You guys have what looks like and sounds like a very smooth running system. And if you're already operating off of traction, you guys are ready to roll. It's just finding that one missing piece, and then it's like pouring gasoline on a fire.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we've always moved forward with the thought of, okay, it's going to be just kind of interest to the person. There's no equity involved because, like you said, it gets into like some seriously complicated stuff. How much is it going to be worth at the end of the deal, the IRR, and some other stuff that I don't readily know how to calculate off the top of my head. So we've always kind of thought that, and it's easier also to underwrite the deal when you're in that. You just plug that number. Okay, you're borrowing X amount of dollars. You're going to be paying this much, and you can, like you said, I never, I was, people were open to, hey, I'll just not make a moment. That you will.
So you froze up.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, you're fine. But what I will say is, and then this is a good lesson, I think Mike probably does it the same way, is so when you're discussing terms, they don't know what to expect. So if you don't ever bringing up making monthly payments, they're not going to consider that. If you just say, hey, I have this opportunity, I need to borrow $100,000, I'm going to pay you 12% interest over a 6 to 12 month term, and then you will receive your principal plus all of your interest back at the end of that 6 or 12 months. You've already presented the deal to them the way that you're comfortable. They may ask, but I've never had anybody say, well, can you make monthly payments? Because I've already given them the terms that I'm comfortable with.
Yeah, you've outlined it for them. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, absolutely.
And you're right. And I got that from somebody else. They said, well, why are you making monthly payments? I said, because that's what you do on a loan. Well, why? And I'm like, oh, okay. He's like, just go tell them that you're going to pay them all at the end. And I did it. And I've never made monthly payments since, because like Mike knows, especially when you're flipping at volume, those are the things, like, that's a big
It's a
deal. 'cause
cash
those
flow
things that
crunch.
kill you. They kill you.
That's exactly why it's been so hard to find a deal, because it's like, all right, now you add in the investor's payment. Not only do you have that, and maybe it's a deal that, there's a lot of potential in it. There's some value add. A lot of it, because of the competition, we're not going in cash flowing very well. And then you add on an investor's payment, and it's like, it cripples the deal. So that's why I like the thought process of just structuring things just a little bit differently to tweak things and, and make things a little bit easier to stomach.
So we're coming up on an hour, and we usually ask these couple final questions, but I'm just going to kind of shoot from the hip on this. Is there any book or podcast that you're listening to right now that pretty interesting?
Oh, of course. First Responder Financial Freedom is one of them.
But given, it's like Rich Dad Poor Dad, First Responder,
right?
It's like all the same, Yeah,
so. Absolutely. No, I love to read. I try to read as much as I can as far as real estate stuff, money. I've done a lot of stuff with that, and I listen to podcasts. I'm in a bunch of stuff. Nothing specific comes up to mind. I just picked up a book yesterday. It was called The Psychology of Money. I don't know.
Great book.
Oh, okay. You read it? All right, cool.
Oh yeah. Great book.
Yeah. So I read a bunch of stuff as much as I can, really.
Okay. If you could go back and give your younger self advice, what would you recommend?
Focus. We've done a lot of stuff on, between doing the fire department and trying to have like your regular day job. And then, we created a framing company at one point. We let some of our apartments go to, have a lot of people in rent collections because we didn't have the time to go over and fix the apartments once the tenants were vacated, because we were spread too thin between doing contracting and framing. And, I have 3 kids, and it gets to be too much. So I think it would be just focus on the real estate path, because it's the right one. At least it was the right one for me. And I really enjoy having my partners, my brother and my other partner. They're, I know partnerships can be difficult sometimes, especially when you introduce the fact that one's a family member. So everybody's got to kind of go into it with the same expectations. But I can't speak highly enough about, being able to bounce ideas about other, things about deals and everything else with other people, and utilizing everybody's skill sets together.
I think too, on this vein, I would challenge everybody listening. If you could just listen to podcasts and audiobooks on one way, either to work or from work, for the entire year, I think at the end of this year, your financial situation would be unrecognizable.
Light years. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, cool, man. We're about ready to wrap this up. Is there anything we didn't touch on that you want to mention, or?
No, that's it. No, I'm super glad that I was able to get the opportunity to come on. So I want to thank you guys for that. And, I appreciate it.
Yeah. If people want to reach out to you or find out more about you got social media or your company, you want to shout that out at all?
Yeah, the company's DAB3. We're on Facebook, and
is that D
like
David Alpha Bravo?
That's it.
Okay.
D and the number 3. And we're on LinkedIn, Facebook, and obviously we have our website. And I know a lot of times you just say that you'll put them in the show notes, I guess is what they call
Yeah, we
it.
said that for like a half year before we actually did it, but
okay.
We're getting a lot better.
Somebody
at it
who
now.
automatically does it. Yeah.
Now we have a system and a process. So once we hit this, we download it goes to somebody, and we never touch it after that. So
there you go.
Now the chances of it happening are a lot higher.
All right. Perfect.
So, well, man, it was great talking to you, and I appreciate having you on. And, I guess that's all I got, man. So thanks for hopping on with us.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right. See you guys.
Thanks again for spending some time with us today. If you found value in anything you heard, please share with someone who may benefit. We look forward to connecting between shows in our Facebook group, First Responder Financial Freedom. Till next time.